Welcome once again to Living in the 21st Century. Joining me today is Isabel Randal, Soprano. Isabel, it's a pleasure to have you on today. Could you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yes, absolutely. So I am based in Boston. I've moved around the world. My dad was in the military, so I was born in Rota, Spain. And then from that point, I've moved. I tell people pick a state because it's very interesting to move from place to place, but it's really enriched my experience. And I'm finishing up my graduate studies at Laundry School of Music at Bard College, studying opera, and it's been really great so far.
Beautiful. I think you are in the right place at the right time studying your music. What really got you into the arts in first place?
Yeah, I have to give a lot of the credit to my mom.
Okay.
My mom was definitely a proponent for where I am with my music career. She noticed that I was drawn to music when I was a little girl. I started off with piano lessons when I was 3, and then from that point, I just kept going with music. Did church choir and did school choirs and everything. But opera specifically was drawn to me when I was in high school. I started taking voice lessons with my very first voice teacher named Jessie Hinkle. And Miss Hinkle really noticed that I kind of had a larger voice, a big voice. And she was like, have you ever heard of a singer named Jessie Norman? And she wanted me to listen to an aria called Mon cœur se bat ta voix, My Heart Opens to Your Voice. And I kind of got the opera bug ever since. And I've kind of had an interesting path through opera. When I graduated from high school and then when I went to college, I actually studied medicine and neuroscience for a couple of semesters before finally making the switch into music. So officially, I've only been studying opera for just over 3 years.
I see. Well, I often ask this question because I interview many people who sings opera, soprano, tenor, you name it. This like more than 8 years now. I'm heavily engaged in the arts, by the way. I often ask this question: where do they see themselves in the future when it comes to opera and classical? For me, sometimes I believe that this had its place in history. Even though it is still up and going well, but I found that it only works in certain countries well, even more than here in America. Where do you see yourself as a professional soprano or opera in the future, especially as a Black person?
That is an excellent question. It's one that I often ask myself, even as I'm going through my studies and as I'm looking towards the future. This is my last semester studying school. I've been in school since I was 5, and I'm now 26. And so I would say after school and everything, I hope to have a career in Europe, to be based there in the next couple of years. But more than that, I hope, as an African American opera singer, I know the importance of visibility and being able to give back to the community and to increase accessibility. That's at the heart of what I hope to do in this art form, because if there weren't people along the way who helped me just emotionally, mentally, spiritually, even financially with scholarships and everything, I don't think I would be where I am today without their support. And I know that this career is a very difficult career. It's hard to study opera, and it takes a numerous amount of years and resources. And I know for me, there's not a lot of African American opera singers, but I hope to increase the accessibility and the art form and to make it more accessible to broader audiences, not just like on the main stage, but like bringing opera to the communities. I'm actually going to be in a Martin Luther King Jr. Community concert, and we'll have spirituals and art songs and things of that nature with a local music group. And so things like that, like I hope to keep that as I continue on in my career. Of course, I have my dreams are to perform on big stages and stuff, but also it's like also goes back to the community that's like at the heart of my career as well.
Okay. You know, when I look around and I see people like Andre Bocelli and Andre Roy performing out there, they have like tens of thousands of followers. I mean, literally supporters. They are really raking in the good money, right?
Right.
And yeah, it's true. And when they look amongst themselves, sometimes you are privileged to see someone black in their whole gathering. It goes for, especially Andrew Roy. He's like the king now of the classical music and opera, you name it. He is it. He's like the pinnacle of this time of season. But I only happened to see like one black person, and then there were a moment where he had bring in specially a black choir from Africa to join him. And I mean, these are good talents. Don't get me wrong, there are some very great black aspiring opera singers and sopranos out there that doing wonders. I've just interviewed a month or a month and a half ago, a young lady from Canada that is doing great things. And she's black also. But I often wonder the preservation of this art form now in a secular world where pop becomes the thing in rap music and you name it, this modern sophisticated music. Where is the place, and where is the place really for geniuses be highlighted in this specific art form called classical or opera? Now, the reality is that over the years, classical was the thing. It was the foundation of music where a lot of music has stemmed off of. The operas was it. Even Procter and Gamble, they had their soaps sung to advertise their soaps. They would have someone sing opera and classical to sell their soaps. As a matter of fact, that's where opera really came from, right?
Right.
And that art form seems to me, and I want to see it preserved, I want to see it go, but I'm wondering if, like, the revitalization into this time of season with a whole group of young black aspiring performing artists come together as a group, and I think there's a group now doing that, by the way, to really propel classical and opera to a whole new level in a different cultural form. And this is not to take anything from Andrea Bocelli or Andre Roy or those great artists. It's not to take from them, but I want to see independently where black people come together and propel this art form off their own steam, where they can make a comfortable living for themselves, to penetrate that market and do great things for themselves. Do you see yourself in the future having any impact within that specific realm?
Yes, I would say so. I think one thing I even I tell myself, it's like opera is not just for ourselves. It's to share. When I'm singing opera, I'm telling a story.
Yes.
And there are multiple stories that are being written based and centered around the Black experience, which is really exciting. New operas that are being written by Black composers, BIPOC, people of color composers. And so that is exciting that those stories are being elevated to what is a high art form. Opera is considered an extremely high art form, but also it's bringing stories that are relatable, that me as a African American woman, like I can relate to those experiences. I can see myself in those performances. So I think again, I would love to be a part of that kind of what is exciting, what seems to be going that direction, is propelling more stories that are not just, we know the stories of La Traviata and La Boheme and all these beautiful like Italian operas and like French operas and Werther and these classics within opera, but also there are other stories like Fire Shut Up in My Bones and Blue that are just as impactful, that are centered around the Black experience or a type of Black experience. So absolutely.
Okay. So do you think we can have, or we can look forward to see a modern day Beethoven or Sebastian or Tchaikovsky or any of those great performers, composers years ago rising up within this new culture?
I definitely would say so. I 110% would agree with that. There's a new opera that's coming to Boston Lyric Opera that was co-written by two BIPOC composers, and they are they have an opera that is being premiered all over the country as we speak, and hopefully around the world. And there's another composer who he was a jazz trumpeter. His name is Terrence Blanchard. His opera just premiered at Boston Lyric Opera called Champion, and then Fire Shut Up in My Bones was at the Metropolitan Opera. And so I think absolutely, I think they are, and I would say even yes, these people are established, these composers are established, but also there are, I would hope, again, I think it goes back to like accessibility. I hope that there are resources given so that Black and people of color, like compositional students, can have their opportunity for their works to be premiered as well. And actually, I've failed to mention this. Next week, I'm going to be in an opera that was written by Mary D. Watkins, who's an African American female composer. And the opera is a 10-minute opera. It's called Courthouse Bells, and it's talking about African American voting rights from different perspectives, from perspective of a grandmother, the perspective of a lawyer, her granddaughter, and then also the perspective of this like a character named Future, of like centered around like we're still fighting for change and everything. And so absolutely, I think it's on its way for these composers rising up.
Okay, so do you go on tours? Do you have a specific group that you are with, or are you looking eventually to start your own company?
It's kind of I've established myself with different with a local company. Their name is Boston Opera Collaborative,
Okay.
and so I've been part of their company, working with them since the fall of 2021. And then with other companies, I've done Des Moines Metro Opera, which was a summer festival, and then I'll be joining Boston Lyric Opera for their production in May for Omar. But no, I haven't thought about starting my own company. I have friends who plan on. I have colleagues of mine who plan on looking at starting companies, but I haven't looked at that myself.
Okay. How would you go about educating young people like yourself to this art form, the greatness within it, how they can move from one level to the next, not only in, not only in terms of becoming a superstar, whatever the case may be, but in terms of bringing an awareness to young people that this art form is so much enriched in history and it's like the foundation of music. How could you inspire young people to partake in this and to make something good for themselves in the future going forward?
I think with when it comes to inspiring young people to pursue opera, again, I think it comes with establishing like relationships with different communities, schools. I actually was at Longy, part of our curriculum for graduate students is to do advanced teaching artistry. And part of that class I took last spring, I worked with two other artists to curate a community concert for immigrant family services in Mattapan. Um, and with that experience of like curating that concert, it got me thinking back to what you were asking about how we inspire young people to dig into this incredible art form. I think I think it definitely goes with establishing those relationships with communities, with schools, exposure, having groups come out and speak and sing and perform for students and to meet one-on-one with students, with community schools, with lessons, exciting them of realizing like even if they're not necessarily interested in becoming an opera singer or becoming a
Mm-hmm.
musician, at least allowing them to see like there are whatever you're passionate about, you can do it full-heartedly with everything that is in you, um, which is the art form opera. It requires a lot of that. It requires that motivation within yourself to keep aspiring to the next level, to inspire yourself to continue to do great things. But again, that has to come within yourself. And I think it's important, like arts, music in schools and having that exposure for kids. I think again, it goes back to like accessibility. Like opera is not just meant to be a ticketed event. I don't believe that. I feel like opera has the power and has the capability of being widely accessible. And I think again, it goes back to um, companies that are established within cities like Boston, like being able to do outreach to students, to neighborhoods, to different community groups. I think that that's so important, especially if we're trying. We, meaning opera singers, people, lovers of opera, opera ambassadors, administrators. That is that is the key. I think is establishing like those authentic relationships of being able to give back.
Yes. One thing that always resonates with me is that you watch pictures like American Idol and American Got Talent,
Mm.
and sometimes you will find someone out the clear blue sky coming sing a piece of opera, right? And they blow the roof off and everybody cheering and so forth. Even sometimes they get the golden buzzer. And then for some reason, as the prevailing of American Idol go down to the finals, they just get phased out. No one seems to win. People who are voting for the person on screen often don't see that classical singer, that opera singer, or that soprano singer who blew the roof off. And this is what concerns me a little bit. When that happened, we see the evolution of a new generation who may applaud the past when they hear a nice piece of music sing. But after that, it seems like that's it. And the whole idea is to bring about a new concept and reality to this art form. How would you address young people with this? I mean, you just explained a lot right there, but how would you really go to their hearts and say, well, listen, we can even modify and put in different modern lyrics or whatever the case may be to this art form and let it live again, and we all can make a nice, comfortable living out of it. How would you address that?
I think one thing in this day and age that we live in 21st century, the 2023, social media has a huge impact. We have a huge digital footprint, and so much is accessible at our fingertips. And so I think with wanting to expose young artists, young people to this art form, I think it's important to realize that it can be done, not just, based on how it was written before, but retelling stories, modifying, like you're saying, like with the language, bringing back, back to like going back to like the vernacular, like having operas that were normally done in Italian or French, like to be translated into modern text, into English, into things that are to you and I that would make more sense in like this
Right.
modern age, rather than keep it's not that we're going to throw away throw away everything that we know about opera, but absolutely I I've seen that done. This past summer, there was a production of Romeo and Juliet that normally was composed in French, Gounod's Romeo and Juliet, but it was
Right.
performed in English, and the text and the translation was more was set into modern text, English text that makes sense, and the music that didn't change. So I think, and the crowds that were, it was an outdoor performance, it was a free performance, and crowds were drawn in record numbers, in like the thousands for this production, on the Boston Common. And so I think, again, back to accessibility, going back to visibility on social media, I think there's a lot that can be done instead of just trying to do everything the same old way of like, okay,
Right.
we're going to put tickets to the event, we're going to try to get as many people in seats, but that's not a lasting impact. So I think that's why there has been what you're describing, kind of that sloughing off of, the opera singer is like gets millions of views on YouTube, right? When they sing their debut piece, and then as the season goes on, you don't hear from them again. Basically, I think it's because that they're. It's amazing to see, like, to see someone perform opera. I can imagine, but also it's like, where's that connection if you don't perhaps understand what they're singing about? Um,
Exactly.
so I think it goes back to the basics, I think.
Yeah, my concern too is also social media. I think it has advantages and disadvantages because you find a lot of people doing this. A lot of people come up sing opera, and it sounds good. They sing soprano, it sounds good, and it becomes claustrophobic where you find thousands of people doing the same thing, and somebody just look at it. Oh, I hear that every day, and I think because of that, it subtracts from. And I believe that it has to be some new marketable strategy that you can move forward with in order to rebirth a new market for this kind of music, a new clientele. Someone has to take the initiative of, rather than having everybody exposed up there doing the same thing and making no sense, is bring people together and making sense. Where there's unity, there is strength. What about a little bit about the marketing strategy you think should be applied to these loose artists that are all over the place?
I would say for one thing, social media has a funny way of like how everyone can feel, how I've experienced this, where we are so connected but we're so disconnected,
Yes.
right? So there's so much there's like, it's kind of like a fishbowl effect. It's like everyone's we're all like crammed in this fishbowl, everyone's like looking at us from the outside in, but at the same
Yes.
time it's like how do we as individuals come together when we're all, like you're describing, kind of doing the same thing? I think I have to say it has to start with us meaning like other opera singers, other emerging artists in this art form, connecting, reinventing the wheel, if you will. We have so much, like you said, there is strength in numbers, but also this art form, theater in general, can be a very isolating career, can be a very self-centered career, and not really, and forgetting the point of like we are performing, we're telling stories for other people, but also like we as individuals collectively, if we came together, that could be a powerful force. So I am thankful to be a part of a small a group of a community group of singers that's very supportive, and it's just about a little over 20, 25 of us. And we're all over the world, and I'm thankful to be part of something like that. And I think if there were more things of that nature where we can brainstorm and talk about, okay, how in our community, how in our each of our communities that we reside in, we can make an impact. And it's like, the domino effect. It's that the little spark where I think would be the most powerful. But again, I think it has to be stepping outside of ourselves as individuals and be looking around, being like, there are more. It's more than this art form is more than us. If it is to survive, I hope it will survive, because opera is a beautiful thing, but also it's one of those art forms where it can be very individually focused of like, how is it going to be an advantage for me? But it's like, what is our legacy after we retire from this career or we switch careers, whatever it may be? So I think, like I agree. Like we have to look bigger picture of what is it that we are trying to accomplish and say. So I think again, social media is a double-edged sword, but
true.
I think it is one of those things where it's used right, when it's collectively used to better others. It is a powerful thing. It can bring so many hundreds of thousands, millions of people together. But if it's inward focus, yeah, it will benefit myself. It